Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Red Pill Diaries, the most informative and empowering platform bar none on YouTube and all of your social media platforms. This is your one-stop shop for information, analyzation, and an in-depth analysis of all of the news, geopolitically, economically, culturally, racially, or whatever you want it. We'll give it to you with a clean and concise breakdown. And like Astral Atmosphere says in the chat, let's go. That's what I'm talking about. Let's go. So listen, there's a lot of things going on, but I want to make this plea to YouTube as I'm talking to you all right before we go into it. I would like to ask that my subscribers, I would say it like this. Please stop unsubscribing my subscribers and stop removing the bell notification for them if that is what you're doing. It could be a software glitch, so I'm not accusing you of anything, but we have been meticulously watching this week as every time we got ready to for another 12 subscribers, it went back down by 6 or 7. And this has been going on every day, and it's been going on multiple times a day. And I'm asking, and I can pull up the pictorial evidence if necessary. So I'm asking, be fair with us and let us grow. Don't stunt the growth. I think that's the least that you can do. It's not stunt the growth. Now, the show is titled, We Reject Media Lies, so talk to the hand. So there's a lot of things going on, and I want to say to all of the channel members, thank you for your support, and also thank you for the thumbs up on the videos that's been dropped. I've been notified for 7 or 8 days, maybe 8 or 9 days that I can have channel members, and we've dropped 8 videos. And now you see that the stuff that I was telling you all exactly the way I told you all, you see is breaking in the news now, right? So you know that someone shared this information with me, okay? And I told you that it'll be coming out and how the stories would morph, especially around this Patriot system being blown up, okay? Now, let's get into it. So, since we're on the Patriot, let's talk about that for a minute, okay? And since we're on the, do you notice how the Western world continues to, their stories always morph? You know, if you're lying, you have to constantly refine the edges of the lie, or it gets so out of proportion that even you won't believe it, right? And so we see that a lot when it comes to politicians and Western officials concerning the situation in Ukraine, the situation in Yemen, the situation in Palestine, all across the Sahel in Africa, Northern Africa, Latin America, and we see it now taking place, in the Asia Pacific. Well, why do you feel the need to lie to the people? If your story holds weight, right? Truth wins out, right? If you're telling the truth, you tell that truth, and you're so into that truth, you say, listen, it is what it is. This is the truth, and leave it like that. Because even through the monotony and even through the madness, it may appear that falsehood wins, right? But time is the eventual vindication process for truth. So the truth may not come to light right when you tell it, but if you leave it alone, truth has enough power in itself to vindicate itself. We see that these people, these Western officials, continually lie about everything from their domestic politics to the global situation. As I said to you all, let us look at something in a rational mind state, okay? The Western world says that Hitler was the most vicious and most evil person to ever live. And he was supposed to have massacred X amount of people. And I'm not saying that he didn't anything. That's a sidebar. I'm just saying we look at their qualifications for being a tyrant. We look at the qualifications that they put on Saddam Hussein for being a tyrant. We look at the qualifications that they put on Muammar Gaddafi and Robert Mugabe and Slobodan Milosevic for being tyrants, okay? So you're telling me the leaders of the democratic West are not tyrants if we judge them by the same standards as they continue to destabilize. And they openly laugh about this. They have council meetings and they have think tanks on destabilizing nations, overthrowing and uprooting governments, and rewriting constitutions around the world, even at the cost of instability and the massive loss of lives. That does not become a qualifier for a tyrant. That is not a qualifier in Western circles when you beam the light on them, and let them see that is not a qualifier for being a mass murderer. So going into Syria, stealing the oil, the wheat, the corn, the gas, and setting ablaze the fields and bombing indiscriminately is not a qualifier for being a tyrant. I'm asking you this because this is not just the prerogative of the United States. We must remember that, as the United States says, the coalition is doing this, the international coalition, which includes Great Britain, which includes European nations, and everywhere that they qualify this so-called international coalition, you see the main components, the main culprits, the main instigators in each and every war of conquest and destabilization. You see every last one of them in each conflict. How in the world can we say that Saddam Hussein was a tyrant? And I'm not saying he wasn't, okay? But I want to now listen. I'm getting a pop on here saying that you're now live on Odyssey. Yeah, I know. And it's blocking my screen over here. I don't even know why that popped up. But this is from StreamYard, okay? So, but anyway, so we call Saddam Hussein a tyrant, and we say, well, what qualified him to be a tyrant? Because listen, when I'm talking to you about these issues, I want you to think. Use that gray matter. Think for a second. Think through all the propaganda. Think through all the exceptionalism and privilege of the Western world. And let's think, what is the qualifier for Saddam being a tyrant? He was brutal and he subjugated his own people according to the West, right? Right? He was domineering and he dictated to others his position and his policies. If we hold the mirror up to the United States, the UK, Germany, France, look what's going on in France right now. And how brutal and vicious the police department is against people. Look what's going on across the United States. They believe that they're the exception to the rules, right? Think about this. They justified going into Libya and deposing a beloved leader that was beloved by more than 90% of the population of Libya because he suppressed Western-inspired protests. What is Macron doing? Not just in France, but in the Pacific. What is he doing? In the Pacific, some of you don't know this, but Macron has deployed French police forces to the islands that are occupied by France in the Pacific. They say that this is European land. Not the Pacific, excuse me, the Indian Ocean, excuse me. They say this is European land and it's off the coast of Africa. I'm saying this because most of you are unaware of this. So the French have deployed police there and they are terrorizing, they are dragging the inhabitants of the islands through the street in chains. On the premium, you saw it. I showed you the videos and everything. They are dragging people and brutalizing them and denying them the benefits of so-called French law. They're doing this right now. They went and invaded Libya for much less. The West turned a blind eye to this. You don't see 24 hours, 7 days a week on CNN, Fox News, talking about this brutal dictator, this brutal tyrant who is against democracy, who resides in Elysee Palace, right? In France. Or what about what is going on in the suppression of the protests in the UK? What about the suppression of protests all across the United States? Right? So you're telling me that we can be diverse nations, but you suppress diversity of thinking and diversity of actions? The hypocrisy of the West. See, we're going to reject all of the media lies, all of the false narratives, all of that stuff. And when they start telling us these things, we're all going to do this. Talk to the hand. Because we're not going to accept that anymore. The brutality of the West is on display, everybody. I'm telling you these things because this is what's turning the world against the West. The hypocrisy. Do as I say and not as I do. And I pointed this stuff out to you all to show you that the West and the Western media willfully and openly ignore their own laws and ignore their own so-called values when it suits them. They impose their values and their laws and their policies on everybody else. What do you think sanctions are? Huh? What do you think sanctions are? The UK have just come back with another round of sanctions against Russia, saying that they're going to now sanction Russia's commodities and diamonds. Who the hell is that hurting? Will that hurt Russia, who has untold wealth in these minerals? Or will it hurt Britain, who has limited to no resources in this capacity? If the United States continues to impose sanctions on Russia's nuclear installation in the nuclear company, because Russia is light years ahead in certain nuclear technologies than the West. And the West feels that they can use that now, in this case, to undermine Russia's top position in the nuclear field. So who does that hurt? Does that hurt Russia or does it hurt the West? Okay, let's look at this. If Russia is leading in a lot of prime nuclear technologies, and Russia is willing to invest the time and the technologies in third-party nations. First of all, we have a bystander that is hit by arrogance and hubris and exceptionalism from the West. Because when you throw this bullet out, when you throw this rock out to hit Russia, it pings back on the bystander, which is the nation that Russia is offering the technology to. So now you're hitting two. But guess what? There's a bing, bing, bing blowback effect. Because think of this, as I told you, most people are unaware that Russia supplies 25 to 30% of all nuclear fuel to nuclear power plants. And this, the United States has acknowledged it's the most efficient and the cheapest fuel in this quantity that they can receive. So now if you look at this, you're already standing on edge with fossil fuels, right? You're already standing on edge with an overworked, overburdened, and outdated electrical grid. And now you want to go and try to hit Russia with this rock, and it pings off Russia and hits you, because guess what happens? With this outdated, over-abused, and overused system that you have, if Russia pulls the fuel back, then you have cuts and shortages in energies, which make energy prices spike, which hits the consumers at home, who are already suffering under these irrational policies that the Western world continues to implement at their detriment. We're almost at a let them eat cake moment, where the government has become so outlandish and so irrational that they are positioning themselves to become the open enemies of those whom they claim to govern. And when this happens, it starts insurrection, civil strife, and eventually leads to revolution and war at home. But those who are piloting Aircraft America and who are steering the Western Titanic can't see the icebergs for the ice. They continue to go forward with these irrational, unsound, insane policies. And then they want to tell you that everything is okay. You make that make sense. I'm gonna go in the chat in just a second. And I see, let's see. Yeah, get the likes up, please. Because this was something that I wanted to do because I had been doing videos for the channel members. And then I had a guest that was coming on the other day, but I had to cancel that. We were going to have a live guest, but I had to cancel it. First of all, I re-injured my rotator's cuff. So if you look, I have the rotator cuffs on both shoulders, and also that something came up that I had to cancel, but it will be re-up next week. We'll be doing it with geopolitical analyst Charles Dunaway, and we might have him on twice next week. I'm not sure, but twice, maybe once on YouTube and once on another platform. But and then we'll have some more guests coming up soon. So I just want you all to know that while I'm talking to you all. So today we reject media lies, and we tell the Western establishment and all of the prognosticators, pundits, analysts, and geostrategic officers that we are not buying these lies that you continue to sell to us. Let's go to something. Let me go to something while I'm talking to you. So remember when Russia was warning the West against sending depleted uranium to Ukraine? And remember the British propaganda machine went into overdrive, dispelling any worries about the blowback effect of what would happen with the use of depleted uranium. And remember, we warned you that this stuff has unheard of effects, okay? Now, they are more sympathetic to the ear because they see that when Russia blew up those stockpiles, now they're saying that they have a spike in radiation that's coming towards Poland. They're saying there's a spike in radiation, a radiation cloud that's heading toward Western Europe. Isn't that something? Isn't that ironic? The very nations who uphold, promote, finance, arm, and then give political cover to Nazi terrorists and fascists on the Ukrainian battlefield are now starting to feel the ramifications of the irrational, unsound policies. And remember what I said, there's always a third party that's hit, almost always. Guess who's hit? The average person in Europe. The ones that are out there protesting and the ones who are at home. Because if this radioactive dust comes back that way, the blowback effect will be great. It will be great. This is what I'm saying to you. These unintended consequences of empire. These unintended consequences of the disregard of national sovereignty and the disregard for international law. There is no person on earth that can tell me that the United States and the Western world respects territorial integrity. How can you do that when you have bases around the world? Like Britain has a base in Canada. Like Britain has a base in Germany. Like Britain continues to hold bases in Yemen and Somalia and Northern Africa. And like these Pacific Isles that they continue to occupy. The same with the United States. There is no way that on one hand you could talk about the territorial integrity of Ukraine while violating the territorial integrity of Northern African nations and Middle Eastern nations and South American nations and even European nations and Asian nations. You are still on the continent of Asia occupying South Korea. The size of Alabama, you have more military bases in South Korea than you have in the state of Alabama and Mississippi and Georgia put together. Make that, and it's a nation that is the size of Alabama or Mississippi. And the entirety of the Korean Peninsula is roughly the entire size of the UK, less than 100,000 square miles, like 94,000 square miles. You have more military bases there than you have in 2 or 3 of your own states at home. Make that make sense? Or what about in Japan, where you continue to occupy 75% of the Okinawa prefecture, and you have at least a dozen more bases across Japan? a nation the size of the state of California. You have more bases in Japan than you have in California. But you telling me that you respect the territorial integrity of these nations when you have multiple bases in Germany. You have bases in Italy, Spain, the UK. And you're telling me that you respect the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of another nation? Instead of you telling me that, show me. Action says what the mouth refused to. You can say whatever you want, but if I'm looking at your action, and you can tell me that you're the best person in the world. But if I'm watching you from my window and I see you every time at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when the other neighbor goes to work, you slide over to the neighbor house, you open the window, you go through the window, you come out with TVs and jewelry and stuff every day. Talking, you tell me that you respect homeowners' rights and homeowners associations and homeowners this and that, while violating the sovereignty and sanctity of being a homeowner with our neighbor. Make that make sense. Make it make sense. This is what I want you to do. We've got to start analyzing not just the words, but the policies of these people who claim to represent you. Because eventually you will be held responsible for this. Think about this. When America finally openly defaults on all of her debt, it's not the war masters and the politicians who are going to feel the greatest brunt of it. It's you. Even as you protest and continue to scream to the top of your lungs against the misuse and misappropriation of funding with the American government. It's you. You're going to feel it. These people in power, they are trying to encapsulate themselves from the blowback effect of the eventually undoing of the dollar, which means the eventual undoing of American hegemony, which means the eventual undoing of American economic primacy. And you will be left to take the brunt of the blow. So you can't just let them off the hook. You've got to analyze this stuff because they're doing it in your name. They're doing it in your name. So let's see. Let me pull up this thing right here about the depleted uranium. This is on Sputnik International. And the article is titled, Ukraine's Depleted Uranium Blast. Europe on brink of environmental disaster. Now, what's ironic about this is, look at Latin America and all of the oil spills that took place that were hushed up down there, that created environmental and economic disasters across the continent by European countries and their companies. If you go to Africa, I think it's either Kenya or Nigeria, they're still trying to sue Exxon and these big corporations for the great oil spills and the disregard for the environment when they were over there doing what they were doing. But remember that Exxon and all of these other big corporations are backed by the full force of the U.S. and the Western armies. Okay? So all of these great environmental tragedies that are happening across the globe under the auspices of these big global corporations that are run by Western people, Western think tanks, Western investors, right? Now look what's happening. See, as thou hast done, so shall it be done unto thee. This is what I'm saying. You better scream to the top of your lung that you are against the policies of those who make policies. Listen to what it says here. Russian Security Council Secretary Nikolai Patrushev warned on Friday that a radioactive cloud was heading towards Western Europe following the destruction of a Ukrainian warehouse storing British supplied depleted uranium ammunition. All right. Now, it goes and says, Sputnik News spoke with Dr. Chris Busby, physical chemist and scientific secretary of the European Committee on Radiation Risks, about how the West's decision to provide depleted uranium ammunition to Ukraine has potentially caused a continent-wide ecological disaster. So now we're having it, and we're finding out that some of the blowback effect and the ramifications of these policies of ignoring sound judgment, rational guidance, and international law has a blowback effect. And it was one thing when the UK and the US disregarded Russia's warnings, right? They didn't care about polluting Ukraine because they felt that Russia would be left to have to deal with that. But now with the destruction of these ammunition dumps that were full of depleted uranium, and the Challenger 2 tank, which has a depleted uranium hull or armor, I believe, has created a blowback effect. And it's not being facetious when I say that the winds are now blowing against Europe, because of their irrational policies and their unquenchable desire to not just follow America, but sometimes take the lead to pretend that they have a greater voice than the United States, to then ignore what is rational and deploy depleted uranium ammunition there. And now the winds are blowing it back towards the continent, the western part of Europe. That's a blowback effect. That's karma. That's judgment. That's as thou hast done, so shall it be done unto thee. That's what that is. Now, a lot of people don't like to hear that, but that is real. That's the reality of the situation. So let's go a little further. It says, recently, several web media outlets provided videos of an enormous explosion in the town of Khmelnytsky, I think that's how you pronounce it, located to the west of Kiev, and about 200 kilometers from the border with Poland. Now, remember, Poland is one of the main protagonists of this war, right? They have visions that they want to unseat Germany as the industrial hub and the military hub of Europe and be the power broker. And they have grievances with Russia. That's amazing. They don't have no grievances with America or the UK, but they have grievances with Russia. I tell you what, man. I tell you what. Let's go a little further here, okay? It says, there were two major explosions which produced a massive, roiling, swirling fireball, which, like an atomic bomb, developed upwards and formed a mushroom cloud, which was black. I've been telling you the ramifications of this. If you look to Iraq, you can see the outcome of the use of these things. If you look in Afghanistan, you can see even in Syria now, where America used some depleted uranium, and all across the Horn of Africa, you can see mutations of children, mutations of people, contamination of the soil, the food, the water. And this was being warned about prior to the US and the UK giving the go-ahead. Because remember, if the UK did this, they didn't just do that without consulting with the United States. And if America had any qualms about it, she would have said, no, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do this. See, when America wants to slide out, but she wants to still call shots, what she does, she hush and she voices opposition to something, right? But then she allows her so-called allies, and remember this, because this gets left out by pundits. America does not allow equals in her relationships. She refuses to have an equal or near peer. That is why she's trying to make war against Iran. That is why she's trying to make war with China. That's why she's trying to make war and balkanize Russia, because she refuses to allow a peer or near peer power to emerge. So if that is the case, how do you believe that these nations who are pawns in America's game for global hegemony and who are vassal states, how do you believe that they're able to initiate these policies, objectives, without going to the empire and first getting the approval? Even with public dismissal by the West, we know that behind closed doors, these nations would never do such. This is one of the points I was telling you about when everybody was talking about Zelensky and Ukraine, and how America was warning against this offensive, and how America was warning against this, and America was warning against targeting Russia proper. And then on the other hand, you had officials saying that they openly want Ukraine to do that. So what they do, they create chaos so you don't get a clear understanding. So when these things happen, plausible deniability. The U.S. can have plausible deniability. So if Ukraine would have been successful in Bakhmut or Arkhangelsk, America could have took credit for it. But if Ukraine fails, America dismisses it and says at the same time, hey, I told them to pull the troops out and to do this and to do that. This is the old game of the empire. There is no way that America funds, trains, arms, and gives political cover to a vassal and allows that vassal to work outside of his control. There's no flipping way. You tell me the situation where it happened. Show me one time since the empire has ascended to being the global hegemon, has she allowed for disobedience from her vassal states. This is why she's trying to get rid of Erdogan a little bit. Because of that. Because of the disobedience. Because of that. And you're telling me that a much weaker, less popular comedian can disobey the United States, right? And just, we're going to continue to fight for Bakhmut, and we're going to continue to do this and continue to do that. And America publicly is saying that, well, we warned against this and we warned against that and we warned against that. Now she has troops embedded in the Ukrainian army. She has troops manning the defense system that she deploys there. She has intelligence officers embedded in the SBU higher offices. And she and Great Britain controls the security circle around Zelensky. And you're telling me that Ukraine is a sovereign nation, and Ukraine, they're making sovereign military decisions outside of the US and the UK? Man, you don't stop that. Come on. Don't insult people's intelligence like that. When has the empire allowed for sovereign thought? When has the empire allowed a near complete vassal state to ignore its dictates, demands, and laws? When has that happened? You can't point to one time. So why is it such a different a thing when it comes to Ukraine? That's because people don't want, they want to give the empire a little benefit of the doubt. They want a little deniability. They don't want to believe that their eyes are seeing the reality of the empire. They say, I don't want to believe my lying eyes. America and the West can't be this vicious. So they are arming Ukraine, and they continue to announce arms packages and financial aid packages. And you're telling me that Zelensky and the Ukrainian government is willfully and willingly, openly ignoring the dictates to the West. Man, come on, stop that. As I often say, I may have been born at night. It just wasn't last night. Stop it. Let's go a little further. It says, I have represented nuclear atmospheric test veterans in the Royal Courts of Justice in London and have seen many films of nuclear explosions. This was not one. A nuclear explosion is characterized by an immediate, intense white light which wipes out the camera film or detector. Let's see what it says. So, and then they start talking about the depleted uranium. You can get this article. It's on Sputnik. Let me scroll back up a second so that you can read it. It says Ukraine's depleted uranium blast. Europe on brink of environmental disaster. Now, this was intended for just Ukraine, and this was intended as a spite to Russia. This is a long article. That's why I'm telling you I'm not going to read. This is a very long article, okay? Whoa. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25 paragraphs, plus some charts, a whole bunch of charts, and a link from Telegram, maybe one or two links from Telegram, if I'm not mistaken. On here, that's a very long article, so you can go look at that. But again, look at the blowback effect, and they continue to double down. Now they're talking about this. But we're gonna supply F-16, and I told you guys on my show, I told you guys months ago that when America wants to kind of feel around and pull out fillers for how they want to run a thing, what they'll do, they'll first they'll deny something, they'll come right back and they'll say, oh, this is feasible if we do it this way and we do it that way. Now remember, I don't know how long your memories are, but remember sometime last year when they were talking about the F-16s to Ukraine, they were talking about that it would take months upon months and even over a year for Ukrainian pilots to become proficient in flying the F-16s, right? Remember I was telling you that. And remember I told you that if desperate powers do desperate things. And all of a sudden, America says, oh, no, Ukrainian pilots, now they say this week, Ukrainian pilots, they're great. It only would take them 4 months to learn the F-16 and fly them proficiently in battle. What this is a filler to see what Russia will say and see if Russia will escalate. See, Russia has not been escalating, which they should have. And I'm not advocating violence in any way, shape, form, or fashion, okay? But America is putting out fillers. And if they don't get any blowback and no outrage from the Russian side, the next thing you'll know, you'll see some F-16s flying over there, even though Russia will down them. But these F-16s will be piloted by NATO people, not Ukrainian. This is what you call America's modus of operandi. This is how she operates. So if now she says that Ukrainian pilots can all of a sudden learn to fly the F-16s in 4 months and be proficient, even though U.S. pilots can't do it, right? These Top Gun pilots can't do it when they're trying to get familiar with the F-16s. Ukraine can. Why? Because she's setting the stage for if they decide to go ahead with it and use Western pilots, then they can have plausible deniability and say that the Ukrainian pilots are flying these planes. What you will have is NATO pilots. It may not be U.S. pilots. It could be U.S. pilots, but most likely it's some. They'll be vetted from different NATO countries, and they'll be used as cannon fodder as they fly into the aerial denial zone of the Russian Federation, and it'll become a chicken shoot or a duck shoot. But it's plausible deniability, and the West can say, "Hey, those were Ukrainian pilots." This is how they do it. This is what happened with the pack battery, with the loss of the lives of those people who were manning those stations. Those were NATO people manning those air defense batteries. These weren't Ukrainians. Ukraine cannot be proficient in using a Patriot battery in a matter of a few weeks when it takes over a year for U.S. missile force and missile defense people to learn that, and that's their equipment. So there was a loss of life there that gets ignored. And the West knows. And all while this is going on, the United States is in an economic debt spiral. Do you understand what I'm saying? Listen to me good. Just listen to this. This is from an old interview. This is a short clip. This is from an old interview that I did with Gregory Manarino. And he was talking about the situation because the election was going on between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And he mentioned Obama and he mentioned Trump, but I cut out part of it because I wanted to get to this point. And he's talking about the situation of the dollar. Now, I want you to understand something. Without the dollar as the world's reserve currency, the U.S. military cannot fund these escapades around the globe and all of these unlawful occupations. She can't do it. And I want you to see what he has to say about the financial situation that was going on at the time, which is very relevant to what is going on today, which means that we have an empire that is fighting for its survival, which means in turn that we have a world order that is led by the United States, but is enjoyed and invested in by the Western world. And it is crumbling. And so what they're doing as it crumbles, they're positioning themselves for war. Remember this statement: if I can't rule, I'm going to kill everybody. That is the MAD doctrine. That is the stated doctrine of not just the United States, I want you to understand. Because American military doctrine is not just U.S. military doctrine. If America controls NATO, then guess who policy that becomes? I'm asking. Guess who policy that becomes? All 30 NATO members or whatever, how many they are now. That becomes their stated doctrine. Also, if I can't rule, I'm killing everybody. And if you don't believe that that is the policy, why are we escalating towards a nuclear war? When all sound and reasonable thought says that America shouldn't have instigated this anyhow. And since she instigated it, she should be more than wise enough to now want to kill the situation before it escalates out of control. But instead, the US, the UK, and the EU/NATO are escalating because they are following the very policy dictates of the US empire. If I can't rule, I'm killing everybody. Okay? But I want you to see what's going on financially. And remember that it's way worse than when this interview was conducted. Okay? It's about 3 minutes, so just pay attention.
The 2008 moment was when this whole thing died. It really did. It's been on life support. Throughout Obama's presidency and throughout this guy's presidency, life support. And what are they doing? What are they doing? Adding more debt, piling it on. There's going to be a moment of implosion here. Going back to what Joe Salente is trying to warn people of, and I've been warning about this for the longest time here. There's going to be a meltdown in the debt market that people are not going to believe. And when that occurs, you're going to see a lot of cash leave the debt market very rapidly. That's going to cause rates to spike very rapidly. That's going to put an enormous amount of pressure on the stock market. Everyone's going to run to the door at the same time. But the cash, what we all need to know here, is not going to go to money heaven. It's going to go into other assets. It's going to go into hard assets, in my view. We're going to see commodities skyrocket. We're going to see the cost of living skyrocket as the dollar plunges in value. That's why Goldman Sachs is bidding against the dollar. The dollar is a unit of debt. Most people don't understand that the dollar is a tradable asset, that its value actually fluctuates. Most people have no idea. Yeah, look at that. It's totally true. Anyway, look, I think, at least I would hope, that some people are waking up to the charade that we're seeing here. Again, I've kind of lost a lot of hope because but at the same time, I've heard from a lot of people. I mean, look, my channel's pretty big, but there's not enough people. There's not enough of us who have an understanding of this to change the trajectory of the way things are. People just sit there now. They're like sheep. They've been dumbed down to the point where they can't walk and chew gum at the same time. And that's all by design too. They're struggling to get by. This is why, again, the Congress can't get anything done. Do we think this is really by accident? No. They want to hang that carrot in front of your face. They want to create more anxiety, more stress. So you can't think. All you want to do is grasp at straws, trying to figure out how you're going to survive, not paying attention to what's going on. It's always the same story.
Isn't the Fed buying its own debt or the U.S. debt tantamount to the drug dealer buying and smoking his own crack?
Yeah, at the same time, yeah, it could definitely be construed that way, although I don't know if I would have put it that way, but it does sound, it sounds reasonable to me. So look what they're doing. Look, it's their product. You're absolutely right. I love how you put this into perspective. People don't understand that. We are existing in a system where the Federal Reserve has the power to create one thing, and that is debt. And they're using that to leverage everything. They're buying it all by design. This is what they wanted to do.
So that was one of the interviews. I've done multiple interviews with Greg. Greg is a good guy. This guy came to my channel when I had 2 subscribers, and did an interview before that. I'm telling you, the guy is a stand-up guy. Now, check this out. If we know that this is the situation economically, and we see that the Western world continues to spend beyond its means, and most of the spending, I might add, is to maintain empire. Look what just went on in Thailand. And my mother and I, I go over her house, we have coffee, me, her, my brothers, we have coffee. We go over there and have coffee. And we like to watch Retired Working for You with Chris, the guy on YouTube, Retired Working for You. He has a real good channel, and he does a lot of things in Thailand, right? So when I'm talking about Thailand, it's because I had an interest in Thailand, because vicariously through Chris's channel on Retired Working for You. Now, the United States goes over there and invests tens of millions of dollars to destabilize the government, to come up with opposition who has now won the election, right? And this is the thing that the West does. If their candidate loses, the election was illegitimate and there was irregularities there. This is what the West does. But if it comes up to their liking, then it was a free and fair election. Okay? But the people who won in Taiwan, they are anti-government, they're anti-military, they're anti-king and royal family or whatever over there, and they want to rewrite the Constitution, okay? And they want to do this so that they can gain sway over Thailand, because Thailand leans more towards China, even though it has not allied itself towards China. And China, for its part, has not asked nor demanded Thailand to do so. But see, with America in the West, it's my ball, this is my game, you play it the way I want to, or I'm leaving the court. And I'm setting everything on fire. This is what they do. You have to conform to them. And then it's democracy. Then it's free and fair. Then it's a legitimate government. But if you stand up to them, if you lean more towards people who they may deem their enemies, you're illegitimate. It's no longer a government. It's a regime. See these tactics that they use? And to say that over again, the regime of, which is a negative connotation, which delegitimizes the government that is being spoken about. These little tactics that they use in an everyday manner that you overlook. So they're trying to bring force against China in Asia. Now, I want you to understand something. China is these countries' neighbors. China is most of these countries' largest investors. China is their largest trade partners. And some of them get remittances from China. And America goes over there, and the UK goes over there, and France goes over there, and all of the colonial West goes over there and set at variance people who would once be at peace. But this is all for democracy. Man, listen. They cannot play these games with me. And now, when you look at the policies, it is designed to make enemies against China. They want to set these nations, their long-standing disagreements, right? They want to set them and amplify those long-standing disagreements, and then step in and say that we support the freedom of navigation, we support international law, we support this, and this, while at the same time undermining every level and every organization which backs international law, which is trying to settle these long-stood grievances. Now, here's the kicker. In the West, they amplify the disagreements over these little rocks and these little islands, right? And they say, well, these nations have the right to mistrust China because China is being belligerent, because China is being aggressive. Now, I want you to understand something. But these nations, these very same nations, don't have the right to keep in their mind the colonization of these nations from the West. And how the West, when they colonized these nations, stole the resources and brutalized and victimized the very occupants of these nations that they claim to want to bring democracy to. It's okay to amplify and magnify one or two disagreements between neighborly brothers. Remember, America doesn't live there. But those nations can't pick up their borders and move them from China, and China can't pick up its border and move them from them. So it's best that they work out their grievances. But the West comes in and they give dictates out, and it's either or. And if you decide to buck up against what we deem as right, you're aggressive, even though we are coming from thousands of miles away, even though it was our policies which set at variance the once peaceful neighbors, even though it was the supplying of armaments and the involvement in color revolutions and assassinations. But that's forgivable. But how dare a neighbor has a grievance with his neighbor? That's belligerence. That's aggressiveness. Man, I'm telling you, man, these people are crazy as hell. And it's amazing that when I look at some of these, the top pundits and the top channels, some of this stuff go, and I know it cannot go over their heads. It can't. Because some of these are some of the most sound thinkers, but I don't hear these viewpoints. And they give the West a pass on some of the stuff. I don't get it. Well, I get it, but you know, I'm being diplomatic about the matter right now. Okay, so listen, we see that the U.S. economy is collapsing, right? And we see more nations moving outside of the sway of the dollar. As a matter of fact, I'm going to play something that is, you guys bear with me, okay? Because I like to give you a lot of information. If you have the proper information, right, you can properly prepare yourself and have a proper perspective on what the reality of the situation is, okay, globally. So you cannot look at the geopolitical aspect without looking at the political aspect and the cultural aspect. You can't look at the cultural and the geopolitical aspect without looking at the economic aspect of it. They're all tied together. And these are dominoes that are falling one by one in the Western world, and it is driving them mad because they cannot continue to maintain their empire if they have no funding, if their currency is no longer accepted. As a matter of fact, let me go to this clip. I want you to listen to this, okay? This is about 5 minutes. Listen closely to this, and you'll see a lot in this, and we'll address it on the back end, okay? And again, hit the like button, subscribe, and I would like for those of you who are listening, even though we may disagree on certain things, let's be agreeable to disagree, because I notice a huge amount of you are not subscribers that view the videos and the live stream. I invite you now to become subscribers and even channel members if you choose to. I really appreciate your time. I understand that time is the greatest commodity, and it's an unrenewable resource. That's why I treasure it, and I try to give you as much information as I can in the time that is allotted by you to me, okay? God is good all the time, I'm telling you. Now, let's listen to this real quick.
Latin America wants to create a lithium cartel that's guaranteed to drive the U.S. crazy. Lithium is one of the most important...
I got to stop it right there. Latin America is getting together to start a lithium cartel. You know, like you have the OPEC, the people that control the oil, and you have a gas OPEC that is forming. And now in Asia, you're starting to get a counter to the London and the New York gold exchanges with the Shanghai Gold Exchange. with the Hong Kong Gold Exchange. Now you have Latin America and Africa, I might add. They are trying to do commodity-based programs, which would strengthen their resolve as a unified front, and also, if necessary, would give them the backing, if they so desire, to come up with a currency or a payment system that would be outside of Western control. This is a no-no. Remember, the former president of Bolivia was overthrown and deposed because he wanted to give the people the rights and the benefits of the huge lithium mines in Bolivia. And remember, in Peru, what happened? The overthrow of the legitimate government and the constant protesting. And America and Great Britain and the West, they had nothing to say about democracy then, did it? With the overthrow of the Bolivian and the Peruvian president, democracy didn't come into play, did it? But when they didn't like Maduro, we appoint Juan Guaido. Like, you have the right to appoint. It's 60 million people in Venezuela. 60 million people in Venezuela, and you're not a citizen, and you have the gall to say you recognize somebody that you pulled out the bushes because they had your security interests at heart. The insanity of these people and the gall of these people to do such arrogant and hypocritical, and they do it right in front of you, and you take it and go about your business. It's absolutely insane, but I want you to pay close attention to this.
Latin America wants to create a lithium cartel that's guaranteed to drive the US crazy. Lithium is one of the most important resources in the world and the central component in batteries, which virtually all electronics, including the rising electric vehicle industry, rely on. While lithium is needed in every corner of the world, the majority of the world's lithium is in just 3 countries: Bolivia, Argentina, and Chile. These 3 countries, commonly known as the Lithium Triangle, announced that they want to band together to set the price of lithium, an arrangement commonly known as a cartel. This arrangement would have massive geopolitical implications, which would shift the global balance of powers further to the global south. Here's what you need to know. Bolivia's President Luis Arce recently gave a speech where he called for Latin American lithium producers to band together and form a collective lithium policy. He said, quote, "We must be united in the market in a sovereign manner with prices that benefit our economies." The price of lithium has grown exponentially with the kickoff of the EV revolution. The lithium car battery market for electric vehicles is expected to grow 10 times larger over the next decade. Arce also made it abundantly clear why he felt this cartel was needed. He said, quote, "We don't want our lithium to be in the Southern Command's crosshairs, nor do we want it to be a reason for destabilizing democratically elected governments or foreign harassment. It's no secret that EV manufacturers like Tesla and Ford need Latin America's lithium, and they need it cheap. In 2019, the US openly sponsored a right-wing coup against Bolivia's then socialist president, Evo Morales. While the US used the usual excuse that they were supporting the coup for the sake of democracy, it's widely believed that one of the central reasons the US was so eager to oust Evo Morales was because of his mining policies. As president, Evo Morales nationalized the mining industry and said that any company that wanted to extract Bolivian lithium had to mine alongside Bolivian mining companies as an equal partner. The coup government under Janine Áñez wanted to privatize lithium, but wasn't in power long enough to do so. However, Elon Musk basically admitted that the coup in Bolivia was a coup for lithium in a tweet where someone accused Elon Musk of being involved in the planning of the coup for Tesla's interest in Bolivia's lithium. Instead of denying the accusation, Musk simply responded by saying, "We will coup whoever we want." Elon Musk owns the biggest electric vehicle company in the world and would profit massively from a neoliberal government in Bolivia that's willing to export Bolivia's lithium for cheap. But the most damning evidence of all is the US military Southern Command admitting its intimate involvement in securing lithium in Latin America.
I had a Zoom call with the US ambassadors from Argentina and Chile, and then also the strategy officer from Levant, and then also the VP for global operations from Albemarle for lithium, to talk about the lithium Triangle in Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile, and the companies, how they're doing and what they see in terms of challenges and things like that in the lithium business, and then the aggressiveness or the influence and coercion from the PRC. And so the ability to get those groups together to leverage, what's really happening on the ground and how can we help, and who else can we bring to the table to help us figure this problem out and box out our adversaries, box out our competitors by teaming together with each other and others.
Well, you might be asking yourself why a 4-star U.S. Army general is calling up lithium companies in Latin America. Consider the fact that the Biden administration issued executive orders designating lithium supply lines a matter of national security for the United States. Of course, when they say national security, they're not saying that securing lithium supply lines is going to cure cancer or heart disease, which kill hundreds of thousands of Americans every year. They're talking about the security of corporate profits and the fact that China is quickly becoming one of the biggest EV manufacturers in the world. The 3 countries of the Lithium Triangle, Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina, control about 65% of the world's lithium. Mexico, Peru, and Brazil, who have also expressed interest in joining a joint lithium bloc, would bump that up to 70%. Combined, these countries would basically be able to set the price of lithium by controlling the rate of extraction, similar to the way OPEC controls the price of oil. This would of course be devastating to companies like Tesla, who want lithium as cheaply as possible. When Evo Morales was in power, his government nationalized the hydrocarbon industry and used the revenue to cut poverty in half and increase social spending by 80%. When it comes to lithium, Latin America faces a similar choice. Latin America's lithium wealth can be extracted for the benefit of a few transnational corporations or for the benefit of the people of Latin America. Hey everyone, thank you all for watching on your lithium-powered devices. We try to put out
I was supposed to play that first because I don't want any problems with the copyright, and I don't want to have any problems with people thinking I'm stealing their content, because I don't steal anyone's content. All right. If I post something by mistake, pardon me, but I think this enters into fair use with the law, okay? I don't cut your little logos out because I want people to see where it comes from, okay? But think about that. Latin America would have 70+% control of the lithium, which means that they could bag their currency, the new Latin American currency, with lithium, with a commodity. It would be a commodity-based currency. This would undermine dollar hegemony, which in fact would, and in turn, undermine the British pound and the euro, because those two are tied. And a lot of people don't realize how tight the dollar and the pound are tied. A lot of people don't realize that. So I have to sometimes explain that. And a lot of people don't realize just how these extra international corporations are. When I say that, I'm talking about from Europe, from the US and from Britain are. They're tied to the hip. And what hurts one hurts the other. And this is why, again, you have the US, the New York Stock Exchange tied to the London Stock Exchange. That's why you have the New York Gold Exchange tied to the British or the London Gold Exchange. And that's why every military escapade that you see the United States on, you see Britain on, or the UK on, because they have everything to lose if dollar supremacy dies. Because the UK is living vicariously with British pound supremacy through dollar supremacy. And we all know that the European Union and the euro is a concoction by the West, by the US. So all of these things are tied, and the intricate ties, as you start with a thread and start pulling it, you can unravel the whole shirt. What we're trying to do is unravel the whole shirt of lies that the Western world puts on every day. So you see, they will overthrow you if you have something. And then what's crazy is this. Let me go back to something. This is a point that I did not want to forget. I want you to understand how arrogant this is. No more. I have never heard anybody talk about this. Okay. Now, say for instance, China has 90% of all rare earths. Now, again, as I told you, North Korea has a huge, multi-trillion-dollar plus supply of untapped resources. This is real. This is another reason for the pressure from the West on North Korea. They can get two birds with one stone. They can actually, if they can make the government in North Korea collapse, they believe that they can take over the whole Korean peninsula and have China and Russia completely surrounded. Because remember that North Korea does not just border China, it borders Russia also. Okay? And they would have all of their flanks covered. That's one reason. Another reason is they want those lithium fields. They want that untapped oil and gas, because remember the West is running on fumes when it comes to gold and silver. And they know, they've done these studies saying that these countries over here have huge amounts of untapped rare minerals, especially gold and oil and silver and things like that, lithium and rare earths. So to put pressure on that and collapse the government, that would be a 2-for-1. They would be able, well, 3-for-1. They would be able to surround China. They would be able to surround Russia. They would also be able to hold a gun at both of their heads, and they would be able to extract those resources through Western corporations for pennies on the dollar. Right? And at the same time, this would give a little breather to dollar hegemony, and would also therefore give a breather in extension to the pound sterling and the euro. So those are things, but I want to get to this point here. I want to show you the arrogance, the racism, and the exceptionalism in Western minds, Western thought, Western governments. How can China's national finding of rare earth minerals and having 90% of the world's rare earths, okay, or that are being mined, okay, and Bolivia and Latin America finding out that they have 70% of mineable rare lithium. Now they found huge lithium mines in Africa that they're now trying to put a number on it, okay? But think about that. And then they look and they say the United States State Department and the United States government in the Pentagon often puts this and say this is a national security threat or a national security interest. How can what I have in my house be your security interest if you live in another state? How can me having $50,000 in my house be a threat or a security issue for you if you live in California, if I'm on the other end of the country? How is that possible? The only way that you can justify that mentally, right, is through cognitive dissonance. So they just found minerals over there. I need minerals. It's a national security issue for me. So now I got to get close and go over there, bribe, threaten, or overthrow them, destabilize them, or even make war on them to extract the resources so that I can live and do what I need with your resources. And I don't care about, because I'll justify it through my media about how I do it. That is racist to the core. That's fascist to the core. That's exceptional to the core. And to justify that takes a huge level of cognitive dissonance. Right? But I mean, no one talks about that. It's fine and dandy. No one really goes into that. This is what I'm trying to show you is this stuff is not the exception. This is what is pervasive in Western society, in Western think tanks, in Western governments, by Western leaders. And then it trickled down into the average person who rely on the government, who rely on media outlets, the same ones that push the government narrative. So the system itself must be uprooted. And those who have made and maintain the system must be removed. Because if you leave them and you remove the system, the very people who made the system are just going to go and recreate the system that they benefited from. That's the truth. So we have to look at this in a very logical manner. How is it that if I go out in my yard, now look at this. You live in California and I live in Florida. I'm giving you an example. your yard is not fertile. So you can't grow carrots, and you can't grow potatoes, and you can't grow onions, and you can't grow peppers. So you have to buy those things at exorbitant prices because your yard would not allow you. What? Hold on one second. Hold on one second. Oh, God. Hold on one second. Are you okay? This is my wife right here. She just said she got into an accident. She's just. I'm trying to figure out if she okay. So I might have to cut the stream short. Let's see. Uh-oh. Hold on one second. Are you okay? Is it good? All right. I'm gonna wait for her response real quick if she can respond to me. So anyway, so I grow all of these things with no problem in my yard. You find out that I have these things and my soil is rich and I can grow unlimited amounts of this. And then you deem that this is a security issue for you. So you got to come 2,400 miles away and come and dictate to me how I should be gardening and governing my house and my yard and my family. This is essentially what the U.S. does when she designates a security issue or a national security issue when it's somebody else's resources. How in the hell can you justify that? All right. I didn't get that yet. I'm trying to wait. I hope she's okay. All right. So I'm gonna stay on it because it may be just a fender bender. I'm trying to wait if see if she's gonna text me back real quick. And if she doesn't, I'll have to shut the screen for a minute and go check on see if everything's okay. And I'll let you know if it's not and if it is. So let's go further. So we look at these situations and we don't take the time out to think about this. We don't take the time out to analyze this stuff. And they put this over on us every day, every flipping day. And we don't see the exceptionalism, the racism, the fascism, and all of the other isms in it. Until somebody sits down and says, you know what? Just analyze this and think of this. I bet you never thought of this way. And you know what? It is because of the I would say the political and mental atmosphere that is pervasive in America. And sometimes we refuse to think and we refuse to analyze because we don't want a certain answer. But it can be detrimental if you don't think and if you don't analyze. Okay, let's go a little further. All right. Listen to this clip right here. I want to give you. I think this is the clip that I need for you to listen to right here.
Well, it's a huge deal because it represents a massive shift, a geopolitical shift underway in the Middle East or Southwest Asia, which until this point in time has been entirely dominated by British geopolitics and then American military. The Saudis had been an outpost of the British and then the US oil companies. They were key to the whole petrodollar system. And the US was committed to regime change in Syria, still is, to getting rid of the Assad government, to the extent that, as Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, the former head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, admitted, the US was supporting the terrorists in Syria against President Assad. So the idea that the US can continue to dictate policy to sovereign nations is now being overturned. And part of this is based on the Iran-Saudi rapprochement, the role of the Chinese in the region, but also the fact that the global South is now standing up to the U.S. and British bullies. And this is the major point of change. And hopefully this is just a first step toward cooperation that goes beyond just not fighting, but actually goes to the point of reconstruction.
So what is he talking about? He's talking about the breaking of American and UK power. He's talking about how these vassal states, these nations now seeing that America is weakened, the ones who put all of their eggs into the U.S. basket are now seeing failed policy after failed policy. Hold on one second. That was her talking. She said she's okay. But failed policy after failed policy. So I want you to listen to this. I'm trying to get a few more clips in. I know the time is long with you guys, and I appreciate everything that you do by sitting by listening and engaging with me and stuff like this. But as I often say, in this bizarre world, common sense is not so common anymore. So they don't analyze these things. This is why the American military, this is why the British military, this is why the NATO war machine has become unhinged. This is why they're pushing war. And I want to bring something back to something before I play this clip. What are the qualifiers for the United States leaders? And what are the qualifiers for European leaders? And what are the qualifiers for UK leaders? And being a sociopath or psychotic people or to be tyrants or to be regimes. What are the qualifiers? Because let's see. Okay. Hold on one second. Hold on one second. I like to thank you. She's updating me and stuff about what's going on, so I have to answer that. That's my wife. But again, what are the qualifiers? I'm asking you this because we have no qualifiers, no set qualifiers for anybody. It's just if the United States or the UK or the EU name somebody as a dictator or a regime or a tyrant. It's them naming them is what makes them the tyrants, the dictators, the regimes. But what about their governments and their leaders? Is not the European Union a dictatorship? Because those who are running it were not elected for office, and they're trying to force democracy on everybody else. How is that not fascist? When they are openly espousing and promoting corporate goals. How is America and the American government not fascist when they are openly lying to the masses of the people just so that they can push through laws and policies that are beneficial to the corporations? And if this is so, isn't it fascist? Isn't it dictatorial? Isn't it non-democratic? And if we are looking at some of the standards that you judge others by, that would make you a tyrant, right? A dictator and a regime and not a legitimate government. I mean, somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just using the same standards, the same virtues that I gleaned from the West. And the thing is getting so out of hand, it's almost unreal. I want you to listen to this, okay? Listen to this. Let's go here. Because this is not just localized anymore. This thing is really out there. Pay close attention to this.
All right, so where do you see the thermometer on this situation? Well, unfortunately, it's going to get red hot. You know, what's happening right now in the banking system is a direct consequence of bad monetary and fiscal policy. The government and the Federal Reserve caused the 2008 financial crisis. They have caused this 2023 greater financial crisis. Thanks to the government, the entire U.S. banking system is a house of cards. The majority of U.S. banks are insolvent. And because they're all going to get bailed out, and the U.S. government, every bank account is going to be eviscerated by inflation. The Fed is going to print trillions of dollars to bail out the banks and the government, and that means every one of your listeners is going to see the value of their savings collapse as prices go through the roof.
One thing, two things. First of all, I thought they had new capital requirements after 2008 to keep banks more solvent.
No, that regulation didn't do anything. You know, they tried to close the barn doors well after the horses had left. The problem wasn't a lack of regulation. It was an excessive amount of regulation that prevented the free market from working, and there was tremendous moral hazard. You know, and by the way, U.S. banking regulations encouraged banks to load up on government debt, mortgage-backed securities, and the Federal Reserve gave them no choice by keeping interest rates at zero for over a decade.
The second thing is, when we say, oh, they're going to bail them out, I feel like people have been playing politics, trying to blame Democrats for using taxpayer dollars to bail out their buddies. That's not really a fair assessment of the FDIC. Banks pay into that. Now, you can say, oh, but they'll pass it along. But by that definition, Pete, anytime a corporation is fined in any way, then it's going to be taxpayer dollars at some point because everything gets passed along. I mean, is that a fair criticism that they're bailing out this situation?
Well, of course, it's a massive bailout. And, you know, we shouldn't even have an FDIC. We had a much sounder banking system before we got the FDIC during the New Deal. But now it's a much bigger moral hazard than ever before. And sure, the cost of deposit insurance is borne by the customers of the bank. It's passed on like any cost. But the real damage is the moral hazard that it does, because Americans don't give a damn about the risks that the banks take. They just put their money anywhere because it's all guaranteed by the government. What we need is a free market to ensure that the banking system is sound. But thanks to the government, it is completely unsound. As I said, it's a house of cards. It's a leveraged mess. The whole thing is going to implode. But what's going to happen is the Fed is going to bail out the entire system. And so you're not going to lose your money. The bank is going to have your money. The problem is your money is going to lose its value. So you can get your money out of the bank, but you won't be able to buy anything with it.
So last question. One, is there an unless? You know, and based on what your answer is to that, what are people supposed to do?
Well, if most people don't leave much money in the bank, I mean, take it out, buy yourself some gold, silver, do something. But you're going to lose dramatically if you have cash. If you have a deposit in a bank, it doesn't matter if the government insures it or not. They don't insure you against inflation. In fact, they have to create inflation to bail out everybody else. But at this point, you know, it's too late to do the right thing. I mean, they should have done the right thing 20 years ago, 12 years ago. I don't see any precedent in the U.S. government doing the right thing. Every time they get a chance, they do the wrong thing, and that includes the Federal Reserve. So you've got to protect yourself from this incompetence. I mean, the majority of Americans, as I said, are going to get wiped out by inflation. Now, the government is going to try to blame inflation on the private sector, on the greedy businessmen who are jacking up their prices, or they try blaming it on Putin. But the sole source of all inflation is the U.S. government. It's the government that spends the money and the Federal Reserve that prints it. These massive deficits that we have under Biden, but we had them under Trump, we had them under Obama, all of these deficits are the source of inflation. You don't get anything for free for the government. All government spending has to be paid for. And if you don't pay for it through taxation, you're going to pay for it through inflation. Higher prices are a tax. And every American has had a huge tax increase under the Biden administration, whether he admits it or not.
It's been going on for a while, and we have to keep an eye on this. And that's why I'm trying to cover it regularly, because the sooner they intervene and the sooner we get new standards, the better we'll be. Peter Schiff, sober assessment, but appreciated. Thank you, Pete.
So all of inflation is created by the government, right? He said the U.S. government. He specified that. So we're watching the collapse of America, and now we see this gives you an understanding of why her policies, her military, her geopolitical policies are unhinged from reality. When you're losing it at home, Gerald Celente has a good quote. He said, when you lose everything, you lose it, right? Well, we see America losing everything. She's losing her dominant position where now over 140, I believe now it's 147 countries are now on the Belt and Road Initiative. It was 140, but I believe now it's 147 countries that are on the Belt and Road Initiative that is led by China. Now those nations will be using the dollar, the yuan, and they'll be using the Chinese payment system. And then you have others on the Eurasian Economic Union, how they will mesh their system in with the Chinese system. You see, the African Union is putting together a system. You see Latin America putting together a system. All of this is outside of US, UK, EU control. And when you have dominated, listen to me good. So you have to look at this from this perspective, because most people don't. When you have dominated for not just 5 years, not just 10 years, not 50 years, not 100 years, but when you have dominated the likes of the world for the last 500-600 years, and all it was musical chairs being played. Belgium, Portugal, Spain, England, France, Germany, the United States, when they played musical chairs with running the world, they made this exclusive club to keep everybody else out, to give them, and as the people started wanting more, they made an artificial tier, but this artificial tier buffered them from these people breaking through to get up there with them. And so now you see a non-white, non-Western nation such as China is busting through the door on its own terms. Listen to me good. Not on terms dictated to by America, like those that were dictated to Japan when Japan was an economic rival to the United States. And not the terms that Joseph Borrell has said, that we do not fear China's rise, but China must do X, Y, and Z, as if China's their children. Right? So, with these terms and China throwing them out the window and arriving on its own terms, right? And doing what is beneficial for the Chinese people, and setting up institutions that rival Western institutions. And here's the kicker. You are economically independent. You are politically independent. So you have the political wherewithal now to challenge the West. You have the economic wherewithal to not only challenge the West, but defeat the West. And now you have a military component that is added there, that you can not only rebuff the West, but if necessary, you can go on the offensive militarily. This from people who have dominated the military, the political, and the economic landscape for centuries. This is unacceptable. And when you look at it from this perspective, the main perspective that continues to get left out, you can now get an understanding of why these people are in power, that are pushing the world towards war. Because these people in power didn't get there by chance. They didn't get there. They have connections, family connections, friends connections that aided them, and you can trace back some of them, their lineage for centuries. So they have a vested interest in maintaining the status quo. And they also have a vested interest in keeping Western corporations dominant. That's why the attack on Huawei. That's why the demonization of TikTok, right? It is because this is a non-white, non-Western entity that is rivaling Google, that is rivaling YouTube. Not only rivaling it, but it had overtaken them, and this was unacceptable. So when you see it and you start looking at it from a perspective like that, and you see that the ones who have ruled The world, and nobody can lie. Africans, you can't lie. Asians, you can't lie. Latin Americans, we can't. African, we can't lie. Latin Americans, we can't lie. Europe, you can't lie. The people who have ascended to the power and have maintained power for 3, 4, 5 centuries are the Western European world. That's the Western European world. That's true. I mean, it is an established fact. Now, I want you to think about this. If you have enjoyed a position of privilege in every aspect of that thing, privilege, economically, educationally, culturally, militarily, technologically, all these aspects, and now there's something that is on the horizon that is stripping these levels away from you, and it's challenging not only your positions, but it's challenging your seat at the table and saying, listen, we're no more subjective and submissive to you. Our thoughts and our policies and our security matters just as much as yours. When you've dictated for so long and you've been in this seat of authority and power, and now you're looking at a former subject talking to you in an equal manner, this is unacceptable. And because that mentality is so entrenched in the leadership of the West, they are preparing to take the world to war, even if it means thermonuclear war. Now, here's the crazy thing about it. If you blow the world up, where are you going to stay? Because you can't, I don't care about all the science fiction movies. You can't go stay on Europa. You're not going to go stay on Saturn. You can't stay on Venus. You can't stay on Mars or Mercury. I don't care about all of this farming you're doing. The essence of you is from this planet. Right? And if you destroy this world, where are you going to go to live? And here's a kicker. And if there's life on the other planets and they've watched you destroy your world, do you believe that they will allow you to come to theirs? Huh? Think about this. Just simple thoughts that most people overlook. But sometimes the most simple thoughts are the right thoughts. We've got to look at these things from different perspectives because so many things are happening, and we're looking at a world that is lashing out because it's no longer the number one top dog. And when you rule for unquestionable, think about this. I want you to think about this before I close out in a few minutes. As a matter of fact, give me 1 second here. I haven't lost my train of thought. I can do 20 things at one time. All right. I want you to think about this. Okay. Now, you have dictated to everybody and you have dominated everybody, right? And everybody that fought back or everybody that's trying to become independent, they're dictators, they're tyrants, they're regimes, right? You demonize the very people that you look down to. But as the system collapses, at one point you're going to be at an even keel with them, and then you're going to be below them, because without the advantage of your currency and your currency markets, it becomes an even playing field. And now you're talking about China with a 1.5 billion people man pool. You're talking about India with a close to 1.5 billion man pool. You talk about the continent of Africa, where some numbers say it's 1.2, some people say it's 1.5 billion people man pool. You look at Latin America, hundreds of millions of people in the man pool, excuse me. And now you're talking about competing with a huge workforce, scientific force, government force that dwarfs America, 320 some million people, 340 some million people, and Europe, 700 million people, 700 million, 800 people. So wouldn't it be better to try to right your wrongs while you're still in a position of power, and to apologize? Because I often hear these little phrases ad nauseum. you know, about how brutal this tyrant was and how brutal this tyrant was. So if they used a machete or if they executed somebody and their execution, you know, may have involved a few people and it may have affected a city, but you go and you bomb a country and you affect the nation and you uproot hundreds of thousands and maybe even millions of people and indiscriminately kill thousands of people. What does that make you? Did you see what Biden did? He said he was going to go to Hiroshima, right? To address the G7 in the world. But there would be no apologies for dropping not one, but 2 bombs on Japan. Hold on 1 second, y'all. Give me 1 second, okay? Matter of fact, while I'm doing this, I'll hold on 1 second. While I'm doing this, I'll play a clip and then I'll come back with my thought after this. This is my wife. She's telling me what's going on, so I'm going to play this clip right here.
NATO is reportedly gearing up to open its liaison office in Japan, potentially the first such development in Asia. Denmark is currently responsible for communication between the alliance and Tokyo authorities. Copenhagen's ambassador told local Japanese media he fully supports the expansionist move.
It would be a very visible, real way to strengthen the relations between Japan and NATO.
Well, there is already a strong NATO presence in the Asian country, with US troops stationed there since the end of World War II. Right now, American forces in Japan number around 50,000 personnel, including naval and air force detachments with offensive capabilities. In early 2022, Japan's former PM Shinzo Abe even suggested Tokyo should consider a NATO-style nuclear weapons sharing pact with the US. That's as NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg, during his visit to Japan in January, labeled its neighbor China a great threat to stability in the region.
China is substantially building up its military forces, including nuclear weapons, bullying its neighbors and threatening Taiwan, trying to control critical infrastructure and spreading disinformation about NATO and the war in Ukraine.
However, not everyone in Japan agrees with their government's stance on strengthening ties between the nation and NATO in Washington. People have regularly been taking to the streets to protest against related issues, including a lack of legal accountability for US military personnel there, water contamination from American bases, as well as Tokyo's rising defense spending, which threatens to derail the post-war pacifism policy. Well, we heard from the co-director of International Action Center think tank, Sarah Flounders, who says NATO's courting of Japan is a sign of the US attempting to strengthen its position in East Asia.
First of all, NATO is a military alliance, a US commanded, US equipped military alliance that exists for war, not for trade, not for diplomacy, not for social progress, for war. And so this new opening of NATO officially to Japan is one step further, along with bringing nuclear weapons on submarines into Korea and building new bases, U.S. military bases in the Philippines, all this in violation of each country's own constitution and trade agreements. In violation of the Japanese constitution. Japan is more than doubling its military. So the arrangement with NATO is just one step and part of a whole series. Really, the basis for it is that there are greater levels of trade of Taiwan with China, Japan with China, Korea with China, the Philippines with China, than with the United States. And how will the United States go about breaking that and setting up something more advantageous to corporate power in the U.S.? How will they reverse this? That's why they want to bring in NATO, the military threat
they want to break Asia's economic rise. They want to break Asia's cohesiveness, because if you have a unified front, the West can't benefit off a unified front. There must be tensions, there must be grievances, there must be a justification for military operations over there. That's what they do, divide and conquer. And then they use their scribes, like in the Bible talks about scribes. They're talking about the media, for those of you who don't know. The scribes are the ones who wrote the newspapers and wrote the official writings and stuff. Those are the scribes. This is what we have. This is the modern day scribes, the mouthpiece. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and all of these so-called online publications. All of them trumpet U.S. imperialism while at the same time trying to deny or disassociate themselves from U.S. and Western imperialism. So Joe Biden, I told you I don't forget my thought. I can do 100 things. And by the way, my wife told me she's all right. So someone hit her from behind. But anyway, and she's doing pretty good. When I say pretty good, I'm talking about she's waiting on the state trooper. They've already talked to the insurance people, all that stuff. So they got all of that stuff together. So I'll know more shortly. Excuse me. But that's what I was doing when oh, here she is. Hold on 1 second. Let me mute this 1 second. Okay, give me 1 second. Give me 1 second, everybody. I'll be with y'all in 1 second. All right. So please don't leave the chat. Please don't leave the thing. I'm just finding everything. I muted my mic 1 second. I'm trying to hear what my wife is telling me. Then I'll be right back with you all. Give me a second. All right, I'm back. So everything is wrapping up. Everything is wrapping up there, okay? But again, they're going to Japan. And I haven't lost my thought now, everybody. That's one thing I am good at this. So you can't pull in. It's hard to pull something over on me. So check this out. Biden goes to Japan. He said he's not going to apologize for the dropping of nuclear bombs. And remember, we must put this in the proper perspective. America did not drop one. She dropped two. Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Okay? She dropped two. After the war was already almost won. So there was no need for her to drop one. But she did it to demonstrate to the Soviets that America hadn't got the nuclear technology. All right? She did that. That America was in front of the Soviets when they took off some of those German nuclear technicians and stuff and brought them back to the United States, okay? And America had finally, with the help of some of the Germans and the U.S. scientists and others, they had finally mastered getting the bomb. And they dropped not one, but two. Is that not a regime? Is that not tyrannical? The most devastating weapons used by the so-called most sublime country. Tell me, how does that make sense? Huh? Now you go there, but not to apologize. Then what is yours there for? It is that you are trying to promote divisions between Asian nations and bring in your European allies so that they can benefit off and amplify the divisions, and then promise that you'll protect them. This is essentially what's going on. As a matter of fact, if you don't believe me, let's go to this clip here. On RT, there's an article that was published May 18th. That was yesterday. And it says, in Hiroshima, Biden promises Japan nuclear umbrella. Now I want you to think about this. This is provocative in itself, but most people overlook that too. China has a stated national doctrine to never employ the use of nuclear weapons unless it is threatened by nuclear weapons. Okay? So now, if that is the stated policy, and we look at China's engagement with other people, China was a nuclear power in the 70s, in the 60s, and in the 50s, right? Or in the late 50s, early 60s. When China fought the war with India, and India was not a nuclear power, did China use nuclear weapons? No. When China had this brush up with Vietnam, did China use nuclear weapons, even though Vietnam has no nuclear capabilities? No. Okay. Now, when China had the brush up with the Philippines that was instigated by the U.S., did China institute the use of nuclear weapons? No. Well, did they ever use depleted uranium? Are they using depleted uranium? No. Okay. So now we have a pattern. China says we will not employ the use of nuclear weapons unless we are threatened by the use of nuclear weapons. So if we look at their track record, we can say, it's a good bit that they're going to stick with that policy. Now let us look at the United States. For decades, America said that she had a no first use of nuclear weapons, even though with our own eyes and through historical records, she used it twice, right? And even though with our own eyes and historical records, she used depleted uranium in Africa, in the Middle East, and in West Asia. And even after Joe Biden comes to office and they make a change to the acknowledged nuclear doctrine of no first use, they changed it to the U.S. will be able to employ the use of nuclear weapons against non-nuclear states and tactical nuclear weapons. All right? Now, these are facts. I'm not making anything up. You can Google this stuff, pull it up. You can see what I'm saying is absolute 100% fact. Okay? Now, knowing that, right? Let's go to this article again. In Hiroshima, the very city that the United States dropped its nuclear bomb on. First one, right? Biden promises Japan nuclear umbrella. Well, what would make him promise that? Has China threatened to use nuclear weapons against Japan? Even when China had the incursion and the brush up against Japan over the decades, have they ever employed or threatened to use nuclear weapons? Oh, no. Has the United States threatened to use nuclear weapons? Well, yes. Okay. So who should the nuclear umbrella be protecting Japan against? Is China occupying Japan? No. But who has been occupying Japan since World War II? So the policies of the West are not adding up and making sense. So if we see irrational policies by irrational leaders, we've got to come to a rational conclusion that they want war. Right? Let's go further and look. The U.S. president met with Japanese Prime Minister Kishida ahead of the G7 summit. The U.S. will defend Japan with atomic weapons if necessary. This is a brash, blatant provocation. But the Western prostitutes willfully ignore this. Had this been China, this would have been front page and everybody would have been talking about this, okay? It says, if necessary, the Japanese government announced on Thursday, citing the readout of a meeting between President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. The discussion took place in the city of Hiroshima. Listen to me, good. Infamously destroyed by a U.S., not a Chinese, a U.S. nuclear bomb in 1945. Projection. Do you understand what I'm saying? This is what lunatics do. Let's go further. President Biden reiterated the U.S. commitment to the defense of Japan under the Treaty of Mutual Cooperation and Security, backed by the full range of capabilities, including nuclear. Stop right there. This meant something at one time. But again, let's go back to the thinking and the reasoning of the Western world. The U.S. and the European nations believe that they can do anything without ramifications. And when the ramifications blow back, oh, I'm stunned. I'm stunned. Like, they're screaming about the influx of migrants from the Horn of Africa, but they weren't screaming about the destruction of the very African nation that stopped the influx from taking place. Do you see this? It's okay to forget that you illegally invaded, bombed, and deposed the leader and his nation in Libya and destroyed decades of progress and set them back to the Stone Age of banditry, where you have gang here and gang there running ramp shop. And now you have an influx of migrants because you destabilized Libya, Chad, the Congo, the Central African Republic. And you're whining about the influx. You're not whining about the policy initiatives that led to the influx. You're whining about the influx. You don't look at the disease. You're looking at, oh, now I'm affected by the disease. You're not looking at all of the effort that you put into making and helping to grow the disease. What I'm saying is, we've got to look at things with a rational mind and an acute eye, and we got to call things like they are. An ace and a spade with this Japan stuff. And this goes to the heart of America. I hear pundits talk about we've got to police the streets, and we've got to and I'm not against it. I think everybody is entitled to safety and the security of life and family. I believe that. Now, to say that and to ignore what's leading to violence is willful ignorance. It's cognitive dissonance. So in the streets of America, there's a growing violent problem, growing crime, growing drug epidemic, growing homeless problem. We can quickly affect change to these problems if we look at these things for what they are. We know that there's an influx of guns in urban America, which is causing violence. Hold on one second. I'm gonna have to shut this down in a minute. She said she needs me. I'm gonna finish my thought before I say it. 2 minutes. All right. Listen. There's an influx of violence in the community. All right. There's a lack of jobs, lack of opportunities. There's an influx of guns. There is a now I want you to understand something. You are what you eat mentally as well as physically, right? Check this out. Who owns the record companies? We talk about the violent rap music, okay? Who owns the distribution companies? What I'm saying, I'm showing you something, okay? Who owns it? Who owns the advertising companies? Does anybody in urban America own them? Who owns the violent the movies that the movie theaters and the companies that push movies, right? Who owns them? I'm asking you these things because we have to look at the things for what they are, not for what we want them to be, but for what the reality of the situation is. And if you cannot come to terms with stuff like this, you'll never grasp what's on a global scale. You'll never truly understand what is underway. And if you don't understand it, how can you address the problem and come to a solution? Huh? So listen. Violence. First of all, we have an open declaration by one of the advisors of former President Richard Nixon, saying that this was a plan instituted by the U.S. government. We have that plan. We have that is a but to ignore that is to wash the government's hands in all of this. Okay, I want you to understand this stuff here. All right. Now, if we have the government officials saying that the stuff that you see now taking place in those communities were a government initiative. Listen to me good. This does not happen by circumstance or by happen chance. This was a concerted effort by those in power to push something like this. Okay, now that it's like that, we got to address is some of the blame goes to the community. It does. You can't obfuscate yourself from that. But now, those who had the greatest hand behind it can't hide either. There are no black gun manufacturers in America. None. There are no major black trucking institutions. There are some independent truck companies and some small trucking companies, but there are no major trucking distribution companies. Why did I bring that up? Because the guns have to find their way into the communities, right? And the music and the TV and the internet magnify the violence. This is something I brought to the attention of YouTube when we were having a dispute. I said, how is it that I don't curse on my channel? I don't advocate racial tension. I don't advocate violence against anybody. How is it that I'm under the gun, but you can go on these music channels and people are butt naked talking about hold this, hold that, money this, kill you that, shoot you here, and that's okay because that makes the money. And it makes the money not for the people that are advocating, it's making the money for the people who control the distribution and the promotion lines, okay? So this is very, very important that we address this. I gotta go in a minute. Okay, she said, okay. Okay. She said it's the Florida Highway Patrol is there right now, so she's good. All right. So listen, drugs. How is all the fentanyl coming into the community? And America gets so mad, she said it was Mexico's fault. She was mad at Mexico for exercising an independent policy. And then they started threatening to invade Mexico. I am not making this up. Go to Google, go to Yahoo, go to Bing, go to DuckDuckGo and pull this up. They were advocating, as Senator Lindsey Graham was advocating military action against Mexico because Mexico was thinking about backing the peso with its silver mines. And that Mexico wouldn't take the United States and Canada's line against Russia. They were talking about demonizing the Mexican government and then vilifying them and then using the press to justify a military intervention into Mexico. This didn't happen 20 years ago. This was last week and week before last and last month. Okay? Listen to me good. So, I'm going to ask people, listen to me good. This is going to offend some people. But I have to ask these questions. Truth offends, okay? But after a while, when you realize that it was the truth, you accept the truth for what it is. Or you can reject it and live in la-la land, lie land. But my job is done once I address it and put it factually. Now, are you telling me that the United States has the capability to listen in on people's conversations all over the world? They have this massive spy program that picks up certain key words, and then they have programs to weed them out so that they can know what this person is doing, this person. They can find a so-called man in a cave in Afghanistan and can pinpoint a penny from space on the ground. But you can't stop large shipments of cocaine, opium, and all of these things from coming in. There are no urban or inner city people that control the border. There are no urban or inner city people that control the satellites. There are no urban or inner city people that have gun manufacturing plants, distribution plants, airplanes, or submarines. Now, if we address that and we say that urban America has no control over the borders and has none of the outlets which is needed for the influx of guns that pushes the violence and for the influx of large scales of drugs being sold, then now we've got to look to where this stuff is coming from and how is it happening. So we see the violence, but the violence is a ramification or a blowback effect of the policies. So you can go after these little peons and the crisis continue to go and you continue to bankroll these organizations that you have, but the problem will only metastasize. If you don't address the underlying cause of the disease, it only worsens. And it will get to the point of explosion or what they call critical. You know, when a cancer patient get to that critical stage, they send them home. They say, that's all we can do. This is what's happening to the American empire because she refuses to address the true problems. And, violence and such and such. Well, if violence is what they see on the TV all day and hear in the radio and see on the magazines and on the internet, and they're without proper education and guidance, how can you be mad? How can the potter be mad at the cup that the potter fashioned? I'm asking. We have to address these interconnected issues. It has everything to do with what's going on in Asia, and in Africa, in Latin America, and Europe. Now, if we have that understanding, that type of understanding, and we know that Haiti is being used as a battering ram between the ABCs of intelligence agencies of the Western world so that they can use it as a hub to transport their dope from the east to the west and from the west to the east so that they can make money, so that they can continue to do what they're doing, then why would you say that they can't govern themselves? When we know that it's the intelligence agencies, it's the institutional, the international institutions which have leveraged that on the back of these people, and it's the West that refuses to allow them to govern themselves as they choose to, and now we have an explosive situation over there, and then we look at the Haitian people. When we look at the situation on the Korean Peninsula, the war has been over for over 50 years. But every year, America justifies being there. And how does she justify? By continuing to amplify tensions between North and South. By continuing to amplify tensions between North Korea and Japan. By continually putting pressure on North Korea and China and Russia to try to collapse the government over there. And when North Korea blows back and says, and fires off a couple missiles or a couple satellites or a couple rockets or fires weapons in the direction of U.S. warships or warplanes or whatever, it becomes provocative according to the West. But nobody talked about the provocations that initiated the actions in hand. So when we look at the situation with the influx of African and Middle Eastern migrants, remember that it was the European nations along with the United States that destroyed the most prosperous, not just African nation, according to the United Nations. Listen to me good. Libya under Muammar Gaddafi was the most prosperous nation on the Mediterranean. That's something that you overlook. And Muammar Gaddafi warned the European Union that if you get rid of me, I'm the only one that's standing in between a migrant crisis and prosperity. If you remove me, you're going to have problems that you're not going to be able to deal with. And now they're having the problems, and they're vilifying the migrants, but not the people who initiated the problem of overthrowing, sodomizing, and killing a world leader against international law. But no one wants to address these issues because it's too touchy-feely. You can talk about the violence in inner city America, but you can't talk about the violence in urban and suburbia America. You can't touch on the violence and why it's like that. The hypocrisy of the West. This is their own undoing. Now back to this Japan thing before I go. Okay? And I'm going to give it to you straight with no chaser. I don't care nothing about you getting mad. I don't care nothing. Once I tell you the truth, it's immaterial to me whether or not you think that I'm harsh. Right? When a doctor does surgery on you, he doesn't care if you don't want him to do the surgery. If he has a mandate to do the surgery and you have accepted that, hey, the surgery will be done. So we're doing geopolitical, economic, cultural, and political surgery. We're doing laser surgery where we're pinpointing pressure points and removing those pressure points so that you can breathe better, so that you can see things better, so that you can add up things better. Okay? So now back to this thing. Biden has reiterated the U.S. commitment to the defense of Japan under the Treaty of Mutual Cooperation and Security, backed by the full range of capabilities, including nuclear. Now, according to the Japanese Foreign Ministry, right? It says the two also reaffirmed the critical role that U.S. extended deterrence plays in ensuring the security of Japan as well as the peace and stability of the region, coupled with Japan enhanced defense capabilities. Stop right there. Let's see about how much peace they brought to Syria. What about the peace that they brought to Iraq? What about Somalia? Huh? Sudan? Chad? Mali? What? Huh? What about in Afghanistan? What about in Latin America? What about in the Horn of Africa? Have they brought peace there? What about on the Korean Peninsula? And now we flip it. Who is stoking the tensions? Is it China? Is it Japan? Or is it the one who gains the most by his occupation? Huh? Has China used or threatened to use nuclear weapons against any nation in Latin America? What about in the Middle East? What about in Africa? What about in West Asia? What about in Southeast Asia? What about in South Asia or Northern Asia? Has China ever threatened to? No. Has the United States and NATO? Well, of course they have. So the deterrent should be against the aggressors. But in bizarro world, the aggressors are the victims and the victims are the aggressor. And they put all of this stuff on you to make you believe that they're justified in arming nations to the teeth so that they can try to vanquish someone that they deem their equal or enemy. If that's not psychotic, you tell me what is. If that is not a policy of, if I can't rule, I'm killing everything, meaning I'm killing relationships, I'm killing bilateral trade agreements, currency swap agreements, I'm killing the political unity, I'm going to kill the geopolitical atmosphere of cooperation, I'm killing it all because I'm the ruler. I'm the ruler. And everybody is supposed to follow my dictates and do as I say, but not as I do. Because if you do as I do, it becomes a threat to me, and it is unacceptable because I rule. This is the mind state of the West, specifically and especially the U.S. and Britain, followed by the former colonial powers who would make up the North Atlantic terrorist organization known as its acronym, NATO. Listen, I got to bring this to a close, and I thank each and every one of you. Subscribe, like, share, if you like super thanks, super chat, buy me a coffee, PayPal or Cash App, you know how to do it. I thank each and every one of y'all. As a matter of fact, I'm just satisfied that you gave me your time, to be honest with you. And I thank each and every one of you all for joining me. I love you all if you love peace, but know that God, he will always love you best. And that until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true, but above all things, stay righteous. And guess what? You know I got to say it. Mama, your baby boy loves you more than life. And I love my channel members and my subscribers. Hey, all of y'all have a blessed and safe night. I love you all. Peace.